I'm Susan Cox, and I'd like to call to order, and we'll start with roll call. Gino Grimaldi.
Here.
Lawrence Green is not able to be here tonight. Susan Cox, so we're here. I don't have any comments. I just would like to just express appreciation to the staff for all the good staff work that went into this. And there's a lot to read, but it's really well prepared. So thank you for that. So are there anyone online? We don't need to. No public comment?
No.
Okay, good. Hey, comments from the president? None? Okay, this is going to go fast. So for the recommendation tonight, Scott Sorensen, IT manager, is going to give the first presentation, contract number 201407. Is that correct? Yeah. Take it away.
Good evening, Mr. Board Chair and fellow board member. Thank you for the opportunity to present tonight. My name is Scott Sorensen. I'm the IT manager here. We're here to talk about the Trapeze and Vontas CAD-AVL upgrade project. The project will replace 61 computers, IVL units on the buses, and bring all of our buses up to the same standard, so all buses will have the same unit. Tonight, I'll go ahead and talk about acronyms, including the IVL acronym that I just used. I'll go ahead and let our procurement lead, Sarah Brightman, talk about the sole source nature of the contract. And then I'll talk about the IT systems on the buses and the benefits of this upgrade. So acronyms, I'll try to get all these acronyms in there. If I throw one out there that you guys don't understand, just let me know. So the CAD and the CAD-AVL, AVL is computer aided dispatch. The AVL is automatic vehicle location. And the IVLU is the integrated vehicle logic unit. The computer on the bus, kind of a fancy way of saying that. And now I'll turn the presentation over to Sarah Brightman to talk about the contract.
Okay, I'm up. Thank you, Scott. So the procurement team receives these requests, and the team has done a thorough review. And the sole source piece for this is primarily supported by the patent rights and restricted data, because this is specific upgrades and materials to existing infrastructure at LTD. And further, that the team had done thorough research and looks into other systems and services of a similar nature, and not only determined that this add-on is a fair and reasonable nature, but is also appropriate for LTD and aligns with those requirements. So our process is at a high level, the review, and then the basically authorizing it through our internal chain of documentation and sign-offs. And our process is to come here, do this recommendation for approval with Scott's summary, and they have really nice infographics to share how that is so key to our use, and that fits ORS language specifically for those existing functions where we need the material and or equipment to be compatible. Beyond that, once our team has had the approval, and this is fully authorized from your recommendation to move this forward to the board, the public notice will go out and allow comment during that time period as required before we would enter into an executed contract. Any questions on that? Okay.
Thank you, Sarah. Ally, could you please bring up the graphic of the IT systems on the bus? Thank you. So before we get into this, I thought we'd go over some of the IT systems on the bus there. The system that we're looking to upgrade for half of our fleet is that IVLU unit, and that's circled in red up there in the middle of the graphic. As we look at all the IT systems that are attached to the IVLU, I'm going to start on the left-hand side and go clockwise there. Radios, Cradlepoint, and this is a cell modem, so it's a way we communicate from the bus to our offices here. Fare validator system is attached. Our video and camera systems, our external and internal signs on the buses, our audio announcements, passenger counters, vehicle telemetry, and the MDT screen are all attached to the IVLU. The MDT screen is a screen that the bus operators use as they're driving the bus to get information and updates from dispatch. As you can see, the IVL unit is at the center, the heart of all these IT systems on our buses. It's really a key part of the whole system. And that's what we'll be replacing with this upgrade. So there are many benefits from this upgrade. I'm going to go over a few of them here today. The increased efficiency of the bus IT systems will be large. The upgraded systems and the ability to manage these systems, the capabilities will be greatly enhanced. We currently do not have many of these capabilities. As I mentioned before, we're going to upgrade about half of our bus fleet with the current IVLU unit. Our new buses have it. Our older buses do not. So we're going to upgrade so all the buses have the same system. And there's a lot less work with just one system than two. There will be a better rider experience with on-route updates for our riders and more increased reliability of these systems. So less chance that these route updates will go down, and the route updates, the data refresh, we hire with a new system. Ease of support and maintenance of the system with one IVL unit. So we'll be able to standardize our support and maintenance of our buses by only having to worry about one system. The IVLU and the way it integrates into all these other ITS systems will be consistent across all of our buses. This will provide more effective support for current and future needs and upgrades. This really lays the foundation for other bus upgrades. As you can see by the graphic, there are many bus systems that work together to create a good IT system on the bus and a good rider experience. This is at the heart of those systems. So having an upgraded IVLU unit will allow us to upgrade those other pieces of the IT infrastructure on the buses and utilize them fully. We won't be held back or bottlenecked by the IVLU unit. This upgrade will also support our operators much better. They'll have a new on-route navigation systems that they currently do not have, showing them the route potential detours and updates there. It will also allow us to update IT systems on the bus if need be. Currently, if an IT system goes down or there's having issues with it on the bus, there's not much we can do besides being on the bus when it gets back to the station or gets back to the office here. Now we can do some checks and do some work on those systems when the bus is en route. It will increase reliability and performance of the IT systems through remote monitoring, testing, and upgrades. Again, we'll be able to do these remotely. We won't have to go and lay boots on the ground on the buses to upgrade a system. We'll be able to update them from our offices. We'll be able to monitor these systems from afar. We'll see when things start kind of going sideways a little bit and be more proactive in making sure that they don't get to the level where systems are failing. And the last bullet point, I guess we're not on the bulleted points. Could you please go to the next screen? Thank you. Sorry about that. The last bullet point is it synergizes our bus IT systems and leverages our investment in them. Many of our bus IT systems are being upgraded. Our radios are currently being replaced, and we have a new radio network. We're in an RFP for our new video systems for the buses. We've just replaced our modem, our cell modem, so that we can have better communication with the buses. This IVL unit will help synergize all those investments, create a much better IT system for overall for the buses. So thank you very much for your time tonight. And are there any questions?
A couple, thanks for the presentation, that was very good. Ongoing maintenance, is there an ongoing maintenance agreement that you have with the company that provides these computers? And if so, what's the annual cost?
We do have an annual maintenance contract with the company. It's a 3-year contract. And I believe it's in the contract itself, meaning it's feathered into the contract. That makes sense.
Sure. And so what, if I understand right, we already have some of these units in the newer buses, correct? So half the fleet is using them. So this is well tested in the field for us.
Yes, it is. You're correct.
Okay. And estimated life of these units it's a pretty harsh environment. I mean, it's not like the computer sitting on my desk or your desk. It's out there in the real world bouncing around.
Yes, that is true. And it's amazing the resiliency of these systems. Some of those old IVL units are from buses that we started in 2006. So think of all the, that's a long time now. I'll coach that with, I bet you a lot of those systems have been replaced and maintained, and that maintenance is very high touch. So I would say 6 to 7 years for a unit on those buses as we install them.
And just curiosity, how long does it take to bring a bus in and you put one of these new boxes in? Is it a 2-hour job, a 2-week job? Or?
Well, for me, it might be a 2-week job, right? For the pros, they get it done pretty quick. They're replacing similar technology. Some of the wiring will be different, but it's not a huge change. So I would guess 2 to 4 hours per bus.
Oh, wow. And do we do that in-house?
No, we're going to have a vendor come do it.
Okay.
And their pros do it all the time. So,
wow, pretty seamless.
yeah, works good.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah.
So what about the training? Is there going to be training required for the operators to use this new system, or is it pretty much just going to be seamless from the old system?
Yeah, it's a good question. They will need training because that route and navigation system is brand new. Similar, we've all gone on vacation. It'll be similar to what you hook your cell phone up to and do that kind of stuff. But they'll need to get training on that, and training is provided in the contract.
Well, having experience with Scott doing a transition, I have a lot of confidence in his ability to get this one finished.
So just another background information for me. At what point do you start worrying about driver, just paying too much attention to the technology and not enough attention to the road?
It's a great question. I've ridden on the bus many times, and they do a wonderful job keeping eyes on the road and that kind of stuff. When they stop at stops or get to a bus stop, you can see them look down there and see what's going on there. Do a really good job. When you're driving, you are completely focused, as you may imagine, on the road.
Scott, when would this start, the transitioning from the old system to the new system? When would that begin?
It depends on when the project begins. We're going to hopefully begin that this fall. It takes 7 to 8 months to get everything installed, and then we'll have the riders or the drivers, operators with all the buses updated. Since they've already got this installed on many of the buses, it should be a little bit of old hat for them, but that navigation system will be a new technology.
So if it starts in the fall, by spring, it should be completed.
I'd say more like the summer or maybe the falls, the next fall.
So in the packet, you talked about transit signal priority. Is that something you're going to talk about later, or?
Transit signal priorities?
Yeah. It was in the information that went out in the packet. There was one slide on it.
I think that slide was removed.
Oh,
I'm sorry.
I still have it. Do we have transit signal priority?
We do on the system, and that will be, I think, updated with this system.
Okay. And does it control just the signals that are for buses only, or does it control traffic signals that are applicable to every driver?
I think it controls the traffic signals themselves.
Tom.
Yes. The traffic signal priority is transit signal priority is integrated into the whole system. So it's playing with the other modes and watching what's going on, and we'll trigger it. We'll get that time. That's how it works.
Okay.
That's all.
Is that in both cities, and what percentage of signals do you think are covered?
Well, I know the MX system has a lot of that, and then there's some in both cities that have, Main Street has a couple of things where we get a little bit of a head start, but you'll see more of it as it goes on, and the technology is getting better. So, see.
Good.
And this is the same vendor that we're using now, correct?
Yeah, so we'll have the
you
same vendor.
experience with them. Okay.
Hey, Jake, can you elaborate on Gino's question around the complexities for a operator in the, driving and
Sure.
using the technology?
So a lot of in regards to the technology aspect of that, we utilize several things, including monitors, mirrors and all that stuff. But the first and foremost thing that we train operators on is being a professional driver. So the reason why we don't call it bus drivers, we call them operators. So we, with the training and the certifications that they get, going through the Smith system, that's where your focus is. So your focus is outside of the bus and what you're doing, and you have policy, procedures, rules, when you interact with certain things and when it's appropriate to look or pull over and make a call or whatever you need to do to address those type of issues. So really it's addressed through all our training, which reflects our accident rate. I mean, it's a lot of, knock on wood, it's not us, it's other vehicles hitting us, unfortunately. But we're really good with our training department, and that's where that generates for the operators to know when to utilize. So we're not really changing the technology. Well, we're changing the technology, but we still do those things. We just do them differently. So, for instance, when Scott's talking about the turn by turn in regards to the route, well, what we do right now is we're typing that out. So they're essentially getting a text message, and we're sending that to all the buses like, hey, we have something going on because EPD just shut down an area of the city and we're moving everything. So everybody's getting a noise. They're all hearing that. They're getting that at a preemptive time before when the next route is coming up. So they're not getting it in the middle of the route unless it's the last minute. That's kind of we'll elaborate a little bit more on when we utilize that. Make sure that we're focusing on what's going out outside with traffic, pedestrians, all that kind of stuff.
Seems like a lot of multitasking.
It does. I mean, that's, we expect a lot. And it's a challenging position to do that. I know I did.
Thank you. That's helpful. Any other questions? I think so do we need to just make a motion or just recommend that we approve this?
The board.
Okay. So we need a motion for that? Or we just decide?
I think there's a motion in the packet.
None, okay. Thank you. Okay.
Should be a motion.
Moving with the recommendation.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay, so after each one.
yeah, for this one, before
Alright.
this as presented.
What page is that one? It says information.
Okay, you got it.
Okay. So is there a motion?
There is a motion. I move to forward the CAD ADL as presented to the board of directors with a recommendation for.
A second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, it's unanimous. Okay. Okay. Community investment plan overview, Matt and Mark.
Thank you, Chair and Vice Chair, for the opportunity to talk about the Community Investment Plan. Last time I presented before the board, I had a lot of numbers and graphs. Not to disappoint, I will still have a lot of numbers and graphs to talk through. So I may stand up to point, but excited to present. And just before we start, I do want to clarify this document, myself included, has no authority. This is not a spend request. This is more for information to kind of talk as we look out for 10 years where we see and what projects we're going after. We will talk about the CAT AVL project. We just had a presentation, but this really helps map out as we look out long-term what LTD will be spending on. So what we'll be talking about, next slide, will be just the overall timeline, what we'll be expecting. Second kind of part, we'll be talking about our framework. How does LTD really get a project to look, to vet, to then bring forward in the CIP? And lastly, we'll discuss some of the projects. In the board packets, because I won't be able to hit every single project, there's really kind of descriptions to projects. So if you look at the appendix, you'll see some of those descriptions and what's in that. If you have a question at any point when we go through the projects, you can refer to that, or you can ask and we can kind of go in detail for. And then also just in the appendix, we have kind of guiding principles that I'll talk about, as well as always wanting to point back to our strategic business plan, our guiding principles for that. So next slide is talking to, oh yes, Gino.
As you're going through this, if there
Yes.
are any changes from what we saw the last time we saw this, if you could highlight those changes, that'd be helpful.
Okay, this is the first time I'm presenting, but in
Okay.
regards, yeah, so we will be able to do that as we go forward, as we talk, and we'll talk, I guess, at the timeline. We'll be presenting this in November. We'll be coming forward, and so if there are any changes from this document, Gino or Mr. Grimaldi to further, we will definitely highlight to really navigate into those. So in November is a key point where we'll be bringing this forward. We'll be presenting this to the budget committee, as well as publishing it for public review. The next one, with that information for public review, comment that we get back, as well as the budget committee, we will make any updates that need to be to align with some of those assumptions that we are looking at. So that will be in December. Staff will be taking all of those recommendations and putting it in. And then you look at March and April, that's where we're looking at we'll be bringing out our proposed CIP, as well as our budget, as those two tie in directly, as well as our long-range financial plan. That's something Pam brought forward as well last time, and Hart, and I believe Tom as well. And so all these documents align to each other to really give us a forecast of what we'll be going for. And then lastly, in May and June, that's when the spend authority comes, as far as what does the budget allow us to go and to loop in for our fiscal year 25. So we're going to go to the next slide for our CIP framework. So in June of 2022, LTD did adopt a policy that was presented. So I'm not going to go through in detail. I tried to do that in detail. It's a lot of information, but I will kind of look at, we have a process. It's really built foundationally on some of our strategic business plan, as I referenced, as well as our guiding principles, which also can be looked at in the document. And just to highlight some of those guiding principles, we want to make sure that it's driving towards some of our outcomes. Is this a sustainable thing as far as fiscally sustainable? Is it moving the needle on some of those things? So a detailed section is in that, but we have those foundational things. And I guess the other last thing from a foundation that we're talking about is a 70% goal in regards to what our federal shares are going to be. So we're not utilizing just general fund. We're really maximizing and capitalizing on that the grant funding to help support our capital improvement plan. And I'll just really highlight the top green sections to say there is a process. We have the ability for people to bring in proposals. Not all proposals that we get find themselves into the CIP, the document you're seeing right now, because there is what the second one is a vetting process. And then the third one is the adoption of what we're bringing forward, what we're presenting, and then ultimately in May and June that the board adopts for the spend authority. I do want to settle a little bit because as we're looking at it, we have a 3-tiered process. And the 3-tier really, it takes a little bit to understand, simple in nature, but kind of complicated. So there's a tier 1, a tier 2, and a tier 3 project. Tier 1, what that means is we actually have a grant, an executable grant from our partners that say, yes, we're moving forward. So tier 1, an executed grant. Tier 2 is we have identified the funding source for that and have also in the process. So sometimes LTD gets what they call pre-award authority. So we've identified a grant, we're allowed to spend, but there's some clerical things that need to be dealt with before we can actually take it from a tier 2 to a tier 1. A tier 2 project is a key indicator to say, yes, we have the funds, we figured out how to spend it, but some of the paperwork aspect is following. Tier 1 and tier 2 projects that we have identified, those are the ones that feed our long-range financial plan. When we look at the tier 3 projects, we are seeking, trying to find funding, going after that and really trying to see, is this something that we can execute funding on before we bring it in to our long-range financial plan as far as a tier 2 to bring it. So the number 1, the best, number 2, and number 3 going in that order. With the tier 1 and tier 2 projects, those are the only projects allowed in the CIP for the first 3 years. So if we haven't identified the funding for it in regards to we're still seeking opportunity, it will not be in the first 3 years. I will pause to see if there's any questions because that's a lot. And Ms. Cox, I think if you wanted the microphone, it is off.
So on the tier 1 and 2, I understand that. But what if there's something in tier 3 that isn't funded, but it just seems like a really important priority? Is there a process that it can move up? Can you get funding from general fund or something, or it just has to wait?
Yeah, so there could be a process, right? I think we don't have spend authority in this document, but those are things that can come up that the district, it aligns with the framework we just kind of talked about in that graph. It aligns with that, and it's a business decision to go after. Many of the tier 3 projects you're seeing are relatively large projects in regards to dollar amount. So you're not going to find 30 million maybe to bring forward. It would be a discussion, and the CIP document is a living document. So it's not to say it's outside of that, but we find a funding source that comes in. We're being strategic in regards to what we go after, looking for other funding sources. Jameson has communicated. So it should go through a process. So we're not just chasing things, but also really aligns with what we want to be more moving forward with for those outcomes that we're seeking.
I was also interested, you said that anyone can bring a proposal forward. Can you just, like anyone who is on staff and they see something and they can?
Great question. So there's departments that will be bringing forward things. So if I in facilities see a need that, hey, this is a need that we have to address some of the work we would like, we do bring those forward through the CIP. There are outside, as you look at that, there's actually external resources or external partners that can bring forward. So some of the projects you're teaming up with other entities. So yeah, there's a way in which we want to harvest great ideas that people may have, but also those partnerships as well.
I think that's great. Gives people inside who have good ideas an opportunity to get them vetted. Good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Question.
Yes.
So the policy around having things funded 70% by grants, I guess I'm fine with that. That's comfortable from a financial perspective. But does it result in us missing things that we should be doing that may not be covered by grants? Or do we pick those up in the other tiers? I don't know. I don't. I get, it's great to get grants, but if the grants are taking us one way and we want to go the other way as an organization.
Yeah,
This perpetuates following the grants.
Yeah, I think there's a way. The target really to look at the long-term sustainability, and I'm not a financial person in regards, that would be Pam, but I think the target was to really look at the 70%. If there's an opportunity or something that we want to go after, that there is a decision point where we can say, so that I would, as we look at our priorities or strategic business plan, what we want to drive forward with, those, if we're at 68 or if we're something else, that could be, it would be a discussion, and we could supplement that with general fund to say, we're going to pursue this because it drives towards our outcomes that we're wanting as a board and as an agency. So it's not that we're calculating, no, but it is a goal that we're going
Do
after.
we ever consider incurring debt? Pam, you didn't hear that, right?
Well, I can tell you, the accounts exist, but they haven't been used for a while. I found some discussion a few years ago about a line of credit that it was chosen that they didn't want to do that either. So I don't.
I was more thinking in terms of bonded debt, long-term debt for long-term projects.
Or reserves, yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, the community investment policy, that is something that we can relook at. I think that's a great opportunity discussion to say, do we want to debt finance or how we want to go after projects to meet outcomes?
I mean, we don't want to go into debt just to go into debt. It's not the best thing to do, but if we're looking at needs and needs that are real and not being met, then perhaps, but if we're being met with grants, we're fine. Just don't know what the unmet need is, I guess. Something to ponder.
No, it's a great question. I think one worth having a further discussion about when projects get brought up and what we want to go forward with.
Thank you.
Any other questions about the framework? All right, we will turn to the next page. So this is where we're looking at what does a state of good repair look like. So this is, we're seeing a lot of numbers and a lot of projects looking at what we're doing. So you're seeing what the cost of the projects are and the cost broken down by, in this category, facilities, fleet, and technology and infrastructure. So a lot of those, there are a lot of numbers there. We can sit on some of these, but in general, you see the spend for the state of good repair, where the spend should be, and that's in fleet. So fleet, we're replacing vehicles on a regular cycle to at least meet its minimum useful life, but also making sure we're bringing in new buses to meet the needs for passengers, as well as making sure buses are still going. So the next slide will kind of give that graphical overview to just see, you have the orange bar, you have the blue bar, and then you have that gray bar. And those are slivers, the technology and infrastructures in comparison with the fleet. The fleet is where most of our state of good repair dollars are spent. I'll go back and just to highlight some of the things that we're doing in the previous slide, because I'm a visual person. What does this mean? I'll really highlight the fixed route replacement. So as we're talking about the fixed route replacement, you're seeing those are how we're purchasing vehicles, looking out. The board allowed, or the finance committee as well as the board, purchase of 7 vehicles, buses to come into the fleet. This is where we're showing what the costs are going to be to purchase those, as well as additional vehicles that may be coming. So the fleet number is a high number, but getting those and showing and mapping those spend out or projected spend out is important for us to stay in a good financial kind of place. And then I referenced the CAT AVL project. Scott did an incredible job communicating that, but that's where this is identified as well to look at that spend. So a majority of the spend for the CAT AVL project is in this current fiscal year, and there'll be some over into the following fiscal year as we roll those things out. The other project, just to highlight, because Scott talked about it this afternoon, is the video replacement. So the ITS video system replacement, that's a project that we're going after. We have that request for proposal out right now. And that's showing a large investment, but we're showing 2 million this year and 1.1 the following year. This is all to meet the needs as we looked at and we vetted these projects. Any questions about our state of good repair? Okay, so we'll proceed 2 slides on, and now this is our improvements. So the improvement projects, just a different category, and those you see highlighted as a facilities, the frequent transit network, the safety and security, and the technology and infrastructure. This is where you see from an improvement, facilities will be the major spender in this. So of the total $96 million highlighted here, over 70 million is in facilities. And the smallest is a frequent transit network at 10, safety and security is at 13, and just 1.5 is technology. So what this shows is as we seek for those improvement projects, it's typically in the facilities. So as you're aware, LTD right now is looking at an expansion and is in design on the Operations Command Center here, where we're expanding to modernize how we address with operations dispatch. Todd Smith did a presentation in regards to what the project's going to do, but it's an improvement. We're extending the facility to address emergent needs because this building is relatively old and technology has drastically changed how we dispatch and monitor staff and support staff. I do have a question.
So I think I'm on the same page, but I see website $450,000.
Yes.
And no problems with the project. But I'm just wondering what's the criteria for when it ends up in the CIP versus just in the operating budget?
Yeah, that's a great question. Larger scale projects that are kind of one-time, one-off projects you would find in there. So when you're looking at, I think that's a $600,000 project from memory.
Looks like total of about that.
Yeah, 650,000. Those are large scales that span multiple years that are going to be quite efficient. So if you're taking that in the operational, it becomes a little bit difficult. And then also seeking grants, going back to that 70% grant, that allows you to pursue those things. And so if it's in operational, those are the things where you can't. So we're utilizing some of our grant dollars to move forward with that.
Great, thank you.
Anything else?
Okay, so we'll pause. Any questions in regards to the project that I can highlight?
It's really helpful to have the tier reference number.
Yeah, I appreciate you actually calling that out. So that's, the tiers associated with that. And, as we talked about, I'll highlight a facilities identified as a tier 3 alternative fuels. That's a tier 3. There's no identified funding. I think that really looks at what we're looking at for the fleet procurement plan. What is that next technology? So it hasn't been there, but we do see that potentially coming to us, and we want to identify that in advance from a planning standpoint. So it's not funded. We don't have anything identified, but we do just at least show what the cost would be for something like that.
Thank you.
And then the next slide will just be a graphical representation of what are the major spends, and you'll see facilities as a large one. When you also look at this, because this can be a little bit misleading, as we talked about tiering projects, we said the tier 3 projects won't find themselves in the first 3 years. So you have this large spike when you're looking at fiscal year 2028. Those are majority is a tier 3 project, and that's when you look at the alternate fuels as well as an expansion potentially on right source to meet potential needs out there. So there's a large spike, but as it gets closer into the fiscal year you would spend it, you would hope to level those things out.
Sort of horrifying that the end number here is 2033.
Yeah, and the improvements, I'll just highlight the improvements are difficult because needs kind of change. So as you're looking at 2033, things may be different. And so from an improvement, what you're going to be doing will change. So as you get closer, and it becomes a little bit more clear, but in 10 years, I'll still be here, but things will be different,
Yeah.
absolutely. And how we can support the community will likely change. But when we go back to the facility state of good or the state of good repair, you're trying to see that more flat and consistent throughout. There are some spikes, but in general, it's going to be more consistent. So we can go to the last slide that really brings things together, hopefully, for people. And this just brings in your state of good repair broken up by the category as well as your improvements. And the bottom is just the chart where you're bringing those together. And the red line really differentiates what the state of good repair. So the things below the red line is what you're investing in your state of good repair. The things above the red line is your improvement projects. And so again, the majority of our spends as we look is to continue to invest in the things that we've already invested in, whether that be buses, whether that be facilities, whether that be our MX corridors, our frequent transit network. It's consistently spending on our state of good repair.
Any question? I like that term, state of good repair.
Yeah, I think last is questions. So,
Yeah.
all right,
You answered them as we went along. I think it's great.
all right. Well, thank you guys very much.
Thank you, Matt.
Thank you.
So that was info only.
Yes,
Good info.
rest of you.
Okay. And the payroll tax schedule, Pam? So you will be doing the tax schedule, the overview of STIP requirements and the grants review. So,
Correct.
okay.
Yes, so I brought everything with me. All right, so tonight I will be referring to the materials that are in your packet. So I'll let you know when I'm referring to those. Payroll taxes is a significant part of LTD's resources.
I forgot to turn that on. I usually talk loud enough without it. So for last fiscal year, our payroll tax total was 51.5 million. Of this amount, 49 million was from district employers and 2.5 million was from self-employed. This revenue stream makes up 68% of our general fund resources. Along with fares, the taxes pay for general operating expenses, grant match, and transfers to support our specialized services. For the last 15 years, that's beginning January 1st of 2008, the tax rate has increased by 1/100th of percent, 0.0001. Each year. This annual increase will continue until January 1st of 2025, when the tax rate reaches 0.8%, and it will remain at that rate unless legislative action is taken. A change in the tax rate requires both the state legislature to approve a maximum rate and the LTD board to adopt a local ordinance to levy the tax. The amount of the payroll taxes we receive increases, not just from the rate increase, but also from wage and employment growth and self-employment income growth. For example, this last year, the payroll tax revenue increased 2.1 million from between fiscal year 22 to fiscal year 23. Of that 2 million increase, about 700,000 was due to the rate increase. The rest of that increase came from growth in wages and employment. So we do not need to take any action tonight. Our purpose tonight is just in sharing this information to simply inform the Finance Committee about one of our significant revenue streams. So in your packet, you'll see the current rate schedule, which began in, this was in on this document, which began in 2016 at 0.0071, is currently for this next fiscal year at 0.0079, and then will increase in January 1st, 2025 to 0.008. And then it will remain at that level And as I mentioned, unless legislative action is taken. The other graph that I included in the packet is from our annual report. And it shows in a graphical format what our the dollar increase in our payroll taxes year over year, as on the top graph, and then the bottom is the rate increases since the beginning of the rate. So the rate started at 0.3% back in July 1st of 1971. And then you can see how it's increased throughout the years. So, and then the other two documents that were included are just the ordinances that were adopted in 2015 for the new tax rate schedule that became effective January 1st of 2016. So, do you have any questions about the payroll tax rate? Yeah.
I don't know the mechanics of this very well, but is there a portion that is not collected because somebody doesn't report, or they report and they turn it over? I assume it goes through the state.
There
It's
is.
back down here, but is that a large number?
If you give me just a moment. So twice a year, we meet with the Oregon Department of Revenue. They actually administer the tax program for us, and we pay them an administration fee to do that. And so they do give us a report on the delinquent taxes and their efforts to collect them. And if you give me just a moment. So in fiscal year 22-23, they collected $641,000 in delinquent taxes, and including garnishments. That included the garnishments. And then they have a receivable of about 3.8 million currently. So those are taxes that have been assessed, and they're working on collecting them.
Statewide, I assume. Is that a statewide number or a?
That's just us. This is Lane
us.
Transit District. Just us. Yeah. So, and then, yeah, and actually, and that's a decrease. So the year before, in July of 22, there was about 4.2 million. So they've been stepping up they've been trying to step up their efforts to collect delinquent taxes. You know, during the pandemic, you know, everything kind of took a little bit of a pause. But even with that, I was pleased to see that the receivable amount had actually gone down year over year.
So I would assume that their efforts are statewide and equal. If they're doing something across the state, we benefit. If they don't do something across the state, we lose.
You know, in regards to collections efforts, you mean?
Yeah.
You know, we have a team that we work with that specifically works for our employment taxes. And there's a group of 5 or 6 people that we talk to on a regular basis, and they are focused on our taxes.
Does that amount, any of that amount, ever get written off as just totally uncollectible?
There is an amount that is uncollected. I don't think I have it in this report, but they do give me a report every month that shows what's written off. What also happens is every once in a while, taxes are contested and then go to court. And then if it's determined that that person didn't need to pay, or that entity didn't need to pay those taxes, then they have to be refunded. And so that actually happened in this spring. We noticed that our daily tax collections were going down. So we had called to find out what was going on. And they said that they had lost a particular suit that they were fighting, and they had to refund those. And they do that they don't take it all out in one big amount. They spread it out over a month or two if it's a large amount.
I'm thinking of efforts that we might undertake at the state legislature, not to punish the Department of Revenue, correct?
Right.
But, you know, could they benefit, and we benefit from additional resources to do these collections?
You know, possibly. You know, that they could. I am looking to see if I have the percentage. You always are expected to lose a little bit,
Sure.
you know, but I'll try to do the math in my head. So 641,000 and collected in old taxes over, you know, if we just say $50 million of receipts, you know, is still a pretty small percentage. Even the 3.8 that's still outstanding, you know, out of an average of $50 million a year, but that represents many years. That's not just 1 year, you know, it is a fairly small percentage, I think. Yeah.
Thank you.
I've been impressed by talking to them because they seem to be just as motivated
Right.
as we are to try to make sure these are collected.
Is this under the oversight of Secretary of State?
So it's the Department of Revenue. Yeah, so I'm not sure if they report to the Secretary of State or not. I don't know if anybody knows that. Yeah.
Thank you.
So, okay, any other questions on the payroll taxes? So, okay,
The big numbers.
yeah.
We wanted to bring this to you just as an information item, you know, as we move forward and assess, you know, how we provide services moving forward we're going to start assessing what these numbers mean. Those are really good questions, Mr. Grimaldi. We got that same question last time we met with legislator Nathanson. She asked about collections and how that's happening and if we're having any issues there. So as we move forward, we'll be assessing that. We'll come back to you with that question you had about amounts being written off. We'll provide that to the board as well.
So, okay. And then I think next step is our the STIF requirements. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So each year as part of our annual financial audit, we're required to provide specific information to the auditors related to our State Transportation Improvement Fund, which is AKA STIF funding. These procedures are to ensure that we are accounting for these funds correctly and that we are complying with proper documentation requirements. The auditor is required to issue a report certifying that they have performed the procedures listed on the agreed upon procedures question list, which was, looks like this, and was included in your packet. So all of our STIF procedure reports have been submitted on a timely basis since we started receiving those funds, and all of the reports have been accepted and approved by ODOT. Did you, it's really a short report on this one. Did you have some questions about the specific things they look at or anything?
Thank you for taking care of it.
So, yeah, it's an interesting audit because there are specific questions that the auditors have to ask us, and then we report back to them, which is a little bit different than when they're going through the other financial records. So, but they do in this case also, they do actually sample some of our transactions and sample some of the expenditures that we charge against the STIF grant to make sure that we're charging properly and also having the right documentation.
So when we do when we have the audit, that's why it's important that that expertise be within whoever the company is that's providing those services.
Yeah. And we did, when we were looking at the new auditor, that was a question I did ask them, right, is if they were familiar with the STIF agreed upon procedures, that, and then the NTD was the other one, but they said, yes, they were. Sure. Yeah. So, okay.
So one of the reasons we wanted to present this item as information was there was an issue in Astoria, Oregon, with Sunset Empire and STIF funds. And we wanted to assure the Finance Committee and the board that we're on top of it. We're submitting what's required. We met with the ODOT transportation lead. She's going to be going to Parks, I think, So there'll be a replacement again in a few weeks. But we did meet with ODOT to talk about, how they were handling that, if there was anything new coming down the pipeline. And we just wanted to present to you all that we're well aware and on top of things.
But that was an anomaly, right?
That was an anomaly that was within two different organizations. So, ODOT will be making sure that they're monitoring how money is being expended at a different clip, I would imagine. And we're well ahead, and we're very comfortable with where we are.
And I guess the only thing I would add is that the amount of funding that we received for the fiscal year 24 is about $37 million. So it's not an insignificant amount. Yeah, and so, okay, all right. Well, then we will talk about grants. So, all right. So in grants revenue has become an increasingly important part of our financial budget. In fiscal year 1920, the percentage of revenue from our grants was 25%. That's our overall budget, 25? Not just general fund. For fiscal year 23-24, the percent of our budget revenue from grants has risen to 41%. Federal grants for operating purposes make up about 10% of that amount. As we look toward our long-term financial health and sustainability, we want to plan ahead for the use of our federal grants, particularly in the area of operating purposes. So we have capital grants, which pay for projects that Matt was talking about earlier. And then there's also federal money that's available to assist for operating purposes. So a portion of the federal operating grant funds were awarded to assist transit agencies through the challenges of the pandemic recently. At this time, Congress has chosen not to extend that funding, and the remainder of our allocation will be spread over the next 2 years. A portion of the ongoing federal funding is for maintenance and upkeep of our capital assets, and specifically for our fleet. So in your packet, you should have a list of, these are the grants that were awarded during our last fiscal year. You can see there's several of them, and the total award is $21.5 million. And out of that, about 17.5 was federal funded out of those amounts. And the rest of it came from either general fund matching or STIF funding. So that percentage is 81.4%. So you were asking a question earlier about, the 70%, if the 70% causes a roadblock for us to be able to fund other projects. So not always, because our percentage is actually higher. So that does give us some leeway that if we have something that needs to be done that with 100% federal funds, then we work it into the budget and see if we can make that happen. And typically, for example, planning projects are not covered by grants. These are usually that's just a typical thing that's not usually covered by grants. So those are covered by general funds. Did you have any questions on any of the particular grants that were awarded last year? Okay, then I wanted to spend just a minute talking about this graph, which is called the Schedule of Federal Awards. That's actually a document that is prepared for our annual financial audit each year. This is our most recent one, which is for fiscal year ending June 30th, 2022. We will be preparing a new one. It will be approximately the same as the other document you saw because it focuses on federal grant awards. So the reason I wanted to bring attention to this is this details out the different code sections and the different types of grants that we receive, and then the amount of money that we receive related to those. So, for example, towards the top of that page, under where it says Federal Transit Cluster Capital Improvement Grants, those come from Section 5309. These are all FTA grants. But those are 5309 and specifically for the purpose of capital improvement. And then, for example, you can see in the next section, those are from Section 5307, and those are FTA grants that are specifically for capital and operating assistance. So that section of grants and funding, it can be used for operating purposes as well as for capital. These are what are known as formula grants. So the FTA each year is given an amount in their budget, and then they allocate that out based on a particular formula that is based on ridership, population, and some other things. So, and then we're allowed to present our projects and present our grant applications, and then they have to go through the whole review process, and then they either award or don't award the grant. That's how the process works. We have a regional FTA representative that we work with that is currently out of the Seattle area. Gloria, our grant manager, we meet with him on a monthly basis, at least a monthly basis. The three of us meet on a monthly basis, and then Gloria works very closely with them as applications that work their way through the process. It's not unusual at all that applications are submitted and then come back for revision several times back and forth before they're approved. The list that you saw is the list of grants that were actually approved and awarded in last fiscal year. And she also gave me a list of grants that she's currently working on. And there are 11 of those that she's working on for a total of about $32 million that are in progress right now. So a couple of the other types of grants that I wanted to point out on this back on our schedule is the next section down, the 5310 grants. Those are the ones that are specifically for our enhanced mobility, senior and disabled services. So that funding goes toward our specialized services. And then just one more section, which is on the back of that page. There are two other types of grants, 5339 and 5337, that are also formula grants that are capital improvement. They're specifically for improvements, and specifically for bus and bus facilities and state of good repair. So we do, oh yeah, I'm sorry, one more, 5311. 5311 is specifically for rural services. So that's the funding that supports, for Florence, Oak Ridge, the out of district type of Cottage Grove, those services. So, and then trying to think, I think. Yeah, and then the total, and then these grants also, timing of reimbursement, I wanted to talk about that for just a moment. So at the bottom of this schedule, you can see by year, the expenditures that are represented on this schedule. So they cover a range of years. We do drawdowns on a regular basis. And most of the time, we're able to spend the money and then draw down on it within, just a short amount of time. Sometimes, though, there's delays either because projects go longer than we think they do on a particular grant anyway, and we end up drawing down on funds that were actually spent in previous years. And the schedule on the bottom will show you out of the $22 million that is on our schedule of federal awards. You can see which the majority of it was the current fiscal year, but there is some that pertain to the previous years. And then the other thing that's a little bit unique about these grants, at least to me, I'm more accustomed to Health and Human Services grants, but these grants, almost all of them allow you to pre-award authority. So once it gets to a specific point in the grant progress, then you receive a letter of pre-award authority. It's not the actual executed grant, but it's almost as good as that. And you are able to then start your project and start spending upon that while you're finishing the grant application, which could take several weeks, sometimes months. And so it allows our projects to be able to move forward and not having to wait for that final amount. So, okay, any questions on our grants?
Sure.
Kind of a comment. I mean, when I look at the capital and operating assistance formula grants, you know, I see a lot of things in there that if they went away, it would be very noticeable. And I know it's not going to go away down to zero. But how concerned do we need to be about whether the federal government continues to do these grants at a similar level than they are now?
Well, the budgets over the last few years have been done with the idea that we are working that amount that's on the budget to be less and less each year. And in our current year budget, the amount that we are using for operating purposes is about $14 million. Out of that amount, about $3 million of that is specifically tagged to the COVID funds. So the 3 grants that are in that section that were directly related to COVID are kind of towards the middle of the group is the CARES Act, and then towards the bottom of that group, okay, the CRRSA, C-R-R-S-A-A, that was COVID related, and then ARPA. We have drawn down on the CARES and the CRRSA, and then so the ARPA is what we're working on right now. In the current year budget, we have about $4 million that is set aside for that. We have 2 more years to draw down on that. So we'll have 2 million next year and then 2 million the year after that. So we have been working our way out of that. But yes, that is something that as we're working on the long-range financial plan, we have to look at the ability of our fares and our payroll taxes to be able to support the operations. And then we look at, okay, how much federal funding is going to be needed in that. And so
is transportation funding a topic of discussion in Washington, D.C. as you have people concerned about the deficit and just battling over the budget and how much should be spent? I don't see it in the news. It doesn't mean it's not happening. I see other things in the news.
Right.
Is transportation funding one of those items that the 2 sides are batting back and forth?
Well, I'm going to let.
So, yeah, I mean, that's a conversation that continues to happen. And quite frankly, thank God for New York City, right? That's where a lot of the transportation usage is, to be quite frank with you. We've had pretty good success over the last infrastructure bill was able to secure money. Now, of course, some of that, there's some concern that there may be clawbacks. So there's 2 things happening. There's 2 approaches. Some agencies are trying to obligate all that they can, right before the clawbacks happen. But I think for us, what we're trying to do is, continue to show value that benefits our community. Our lobbyists are aware of that. Our national association is aware of that as well. And we continue to have those conversations on what are the real outcomes. And that's why that's a great question, but that's the reason why it's important for us to transition to outcomes and local outcomes that matter to where we are. Each transit agency is looking at that hard for that very reason. So I suspect that depending on election outcomes, the conversation will be more strenuous or just a little less strenuous. But there will be that conversation.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and then the one other thing I can tell you is that, because we checked on that, in regards to the federal budget and whether they're going to extend the debt ceiling, and, there's a lot of talk about that. Transportation is considered an essential service. And Gloria actually, I asked her to check with the FTA or FTA rep just to make sure that there wouldn't be any hiccups if something happened this fall. And he assured us that because it's considered an essential service, it is exempted from any of that discussion and any issues regarding the budget.
So what you're talking about is if there's a shutdown, we would not be impacted.
Correct. That's what they said.
Great.
But also, I think this demonstrates why it's so important to work closely with our own delegation and make sure that they know our value added and what we contribute to the community just in general. So I think you're doing a great job of that. I do have one question. I apologize for not knowing this, but the LCOG volunteer escort, and then it's passed through Lane Council of Governments.
Which one are you looking?
Line item, but it's the very last.
It's on the
Very last page.
Yeah, very last page, very last. It's the total federal awards, it's right above that. I was just curious about that because this says through HHS.
Yes, and I don't know, Cosette, I'm sorry to have to pen that one. Can you talk about that one? Yeah.
So the Health and Human Services, remind me again.
Through LCOG, you mean?
There's the LCOG and then there's
the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. Yeah.
So,
and LCOG volunteer escort. Yeah.
So the volunteer escort is for people who really are kind of at a gap. So they don't fall into any of our regular services, but they need assistance. So we provide reimbursement for someone to go out and provide a trip. Mostly medical trips. So it's typically going out into the county and bringing people into a metro area for medical appointments. And then we reimburse them their gas for that. And then
Yeah.
We don't manage that necessarily. That needs to pass through. Oh, we
we
do.
manage it through our life source cost center, and then we get reimbursed for those.
Okay. Is that a duplication a little bit, having it go both organizations, or there's
No.
clear division of who does what?
Yeah.
Okay.
No.
Okay. Thank you. So, okay. All right.
Sharon, do you have any other questions or
Nope.
comments?
So, all right.
And we passed the one motion that needed to go forward to the executive or to the board, finance committee. Okay. Do you have anything else to add?
No, except that very good question on the LCOG arrangement. We do quite a bit of work with LCOG to make sure that the region is covered. We're beginning a process now to assess what that means and what's the most efficient way to get those pieces done. So more on that to come as well.
Okay. Anything to be said from that side of the room? Ready to go home. Thank you, everyone. Appreciate it. Meeting is adjourned.